Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Wednesday Facebook Live at 5, coming to you live from sunny Bloomfield Hills. I am at the eastern edge of Cranbrook's campus at Thornlea, which is a home built by our founder's youngest son, Henry Scripps Booth, for his son, or for his wife, Carolyn Farr Booth, and eventually their 5 children who grew up in this absolutely massive and beautiful home. Today on our Live at 5 tour, I will take you a little bit around the exterior of the home, but I'm afraid of losing Wi-Fi, so I won't stray too far. And then we'll go through from the basement to the first floor and then to the bedrooms on the second and third floor. I think many of you will be enchanted by the house as I was on my first visit here. And its many beautiful details, including stunning Pewabic pottery bathrooms. If you are joining me from afar and you've never visited Cranbrook, this is a house that has had a few different purposes since coming into the Cranbrook fold in the 1990s. It was used briefly as an inn. It was used as cultural properties offices. It was used as a residence for our security leader and our archivist. Right now, we're using it for storage for cultural properties. We use it for special events throughout the year. And then we also are starting to use the home for classroom space. So I know that there are some descendants of Henry Booth that are probably watching right now. So welcome back to your old house. I know one of Henry's daughters is on Facebook and many of his grandchildren all over the country. So you all are going to have stories that I don't have or aren't mine to share. And so feel free to leave comments down below. I know people would love to hear about the personal experience of growing up in such an interesting and beautiful home and being surrounded by such an influential person as your father and grandfather. I will start the tour by just sort of pointing out where we are. So it's 4.5 acres of what used to be a thorny meadow. And if we headed out of that gate, Cranbrook House would be right on the hill. Brookside School Cranbrook is on the left of the gate. And of course, Brookside School was designed by Henry Booth. And so he is responsible for this whole series of buildings. Now here is the house, which is a very eclectic style. Henry Scripps Booth was quite young when he designed this. He had just graduated from the University of Michigan's architecture program in the spring of 1924, when he opened up an architectural office with his best friend from college, J. Robert F. Swanson. Swanson and Booth, the firm, was only active for 2 years, but in that 2 years, they helped design Cranbrook School for Boys with Eliel Saarinen. They designed Hedgegate, they designed the Rectory House at Christ Church Cranbrook, and a few other projects in the area. But this house was designed just by Henry himself, and it features an outside that Henry described as being like a series of buildings built over the years along an English street, all parts harmonious but slightly different. And so you'll see that he uses different materials, including Dutch-style brick, and then he uses concrete block, which is something that Albert Kahn used for many of the Cranbrook buildings. The roof, like Saarinen House on campus, is made up of a ceramic-fired tile that reads this sort of lovely red color. And then there are the great wooden garage doors. And then there is an addition to the house that we'll see from the inside. Around the front door, there is a limestone surround. And pretty amazing details here at the entrance. We're not quite ready to head inside, but I just want to point out while the sun is catching it, this beautiful purple glass light fixture, which is probably something that Henry and Carolyn picked up in their travels. They traveled throughout Europe throughout their lives and the global south. I don't know if they ever went to Asia. The windows were added after they had moved into the house because they realized how dark it was inside. And then there is this amazing bronze doorknob, which if any of you recognize what artist or maker this might be, I would love to know more about it. We have virtually nothing in our records about the doorknob. Now, here by the front door, there's also the cornerstone of the house, which was laid on June 4th, 1925. So it's close to 95 years old, or it is 95 years old this month since the laying of the cornerstone. And it was really a who's who that was in attendance when Henry Booth laid the cornerstone. Henry Booth, who was born in Detroit and spent his first 10 years in the family's Trumbull Avenue home, moved to Cranbrook with his parents at the age of 10 in 1908. He was born in 1897. When he moved up here, he could no longer attend the Liggett School, and so he had a private tutor until 1913, when Henry was sent off to the Asheville School. What's interesting is when he was sent to the Asheville School, he was doing what most wealthy Detroit and Midwestern families did, which was to send their sons back east for education. And part of the inspiration of opening Cranbrook School for Boys in 1927 was to give Midwestern families a place to send their children to preparatory school. But of course, that wasn't ready in time for young Henry, and so he studied until 1918 at the Asheville School, which is still in operation. And in 1918, he enrolled at the University of Michigan, where he decided to study architecture. While he was at Michigan, he befriended a Swedish-speaking student from northern Michigan, J. Robert F. Swanson. They became best friends. We have these amazing pictures of Bob and Harry, as they were known, hanging out here at Cranbrook and in Ann Arbor, drinking on the roof of Hill Auditorium that had just been completed. And in 1922, they set off on a 10-month journey through Europe. They traveled through Scandinavia, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, England. And in this 10-month journey, they made a lot of friends. They saw a lot of architecture. They both did pretty amazing sketches, and you can see the sketchbooks of both Bob and Harry in Cranbrook archives. And it was this incredibly influential grand tour for the two young architects. In late 1922, they got word that Michigan was going to be having a very special guest professor who would be teaching in 1923. And that was none other than our favorite Finnish-American architect, Eliel Saarinen. And so Henry and J. Robert F. Swanson returned from Europe to re-enroll at Michigan for their last semester, and they were students under Eliel Saarinen. That's a very long biography of Henry Booth in order to tell you that at the laying of the cornerstone of this building on June 4th, 1925, Henry's parents were here, Carolyn's parents were here, but also Eliel and Loya Saarinen were here for the cornerstone, and Dr. Marquis, the rector of Christ Church Cranbrook. So it was a bit of a who's who as they set to transform this thorny meadow into Thornlea house, and that is where the name comes from. Now, I don't want to wander around and lose my connection, so I'll just point out the change in styles as the house moves and sort of turns the corner. The house is quite beautiful, but it was designed by a 23-year-old, and there are a few things that we'll see as we go throughout that really showcase that this was Henry Booth's first home. The backyard is sort of cloistered off behind this gate, and Carolyn, Mrs. Booth, had a garden there on the right. But let's go ahead and head inside. So it took 2 years to build the home. Carolyn and Henry had married in September of 1924, and they took a 2-month-long honeymoon through Europe. That is where Henry began sketching out his plans for Thornley. And then during the 2 years of construction, which was led by the contractor Charles Wearmouth of Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is the same contractor who built all of Cranbrook's institutions. While Wearmouth was working on Thornley, Henry, Carolyn, their youngest son, or their first son, Stephen, were living in Brookside Cottage, which you may know Brookside Cottage is the little 19th century building next to Kingswood School, a little stone house that has had many different residents over the years. When they moved into the house in 1927, it was ready for their growing family, and Henry and Carolyn did have 5 children who grew up here in the house. They lived here until World War II, when they shut down parts of the house and only lived in half of it, in a much smaller portion. They also moved out once to allow Henry's older sister, Grace Booth Wallace, and her family to live here while their house next door was expanded. And then they lived here all the way until Carolyn passed away in 1984 and Henry passed away at the age of 90 in 1988. And that is when his descendants gave the home to Cranbrook. So in the vestibule, now that we know a little bit more about Henry, and I'll talk about Carolyn in a moment, let's look at some of the beautiful art objects that Henry filled the home with. He was, much like his father, really impressed and indebted to the arts and crafts movement. And so a lot of what you'll see is handicraft or handmade pieces. Unlike George and Ellen Booth, though, Henry did not sort of spend his lifetime replacing every single item in the house with something handmade. So there's oftentimes you'll see where he is using a modern 20th century piece of furniture in a historic style. And then he pairs it with a Italian antique. And so there is a mixture of sort of Hudson's furniture from Detroit and then antique pieces as well. This lovely impressionist landscape is by the American painter, Detroit-born of Polish descent, or I think he may be Polish-born, Leon Makowski. And Leon was a noted Detroit painter who studied in France, and this is a Connecticut landscape view. And I think that as exquisite as the view of Connecticut is this magnificent frame that surrounds the piece. Above the fireplace here in the entrance, which I don't know how he got the smoke to go up when this huge room was probably forward drafting as well, but I'm sure it worked, is a portrait by John Koch, who is a society painter who painted many members of the family, and this is Melinda Booth, the youngest daughter. I believe she's the youngest. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. And then also on in this room, I see someone commented, is Brighty of the Grand Canyon. And you may know the novel from the 1950s. In the 1950s, Stephen and his wife, Betty, read Brighty of the Grand Canyon, and they were enraptured by the story. And so they decided to help finance and produce a film of 1966. And these bronze Brighties were sold to help raise money for the film. And so this is Brighty of Thornley House. Now, we'll head upstairs in a few minutes, but guarding our entrance into the home and bringing us blessings is this Balinese figure of the Dewi Siri, who is a guardian figure. So she is bringing us good luck, suspended from the ceiling. Now, remember that Henry Booth studied architecture with Eliel Saarinen at Michigan. He was also best friends with Bob Swanson, and Bob Swanson spoke Swedish. He was from a small town in the Upper Peninsula. He served as the Saarinen's translator and then eloped with the Saarinen's daughter and became the Saarinen's son-in-law. And so Henry Booth would stay in touch with the Saarinens through the rest of his life because he was so involved with Cranbrook. He later in his life said, "I have seen my life's work of continuing to the best of my abilities the institutions started by my parents." So he would stay in touch with the Saarinens, and then Bob Swanson married into the Saarinen family. And so there are actually a lot of details that we'll see here at Thornley that I trace directly to specific things that Saarinen was doing. And the first of those features, I would say, is this painted ceiling. Now, a blue painted ceiling, there are American examples, there's Scandinavian examples, but what particularly strikes me as Saarinen-esque is both the shade of blue is quite close to the coloring that Pipson Saarinen, Bob's wife, loved to use. And also notice that little red detail. And you'll see how Henry Booth picks up that sort of detail here. And this is something that I don't know. I suspect this was not here the day that the Booths moved in. I imagine that this is something that was added after Pipson, Saarinen, Swanson began doing the same detail all around Cranbrook. Now, feel free to any questions in the comments as we move through the house. We're heading into the living room, which is a pretty grand space. I think just like his parents, Henry Booth knew that his place in society and his sort of role as this maintainer of the Cranbrook legacy would mean that he was always entertaining, and so he builds a home that really is quite generously proportioned, and why we are still able today to use Thornley for mothers' councils and dads' clubs and all sorts of special events, fundraisers, chamber music. It really is a very special house to have. Now, in this room, I want to point out a few things, including the Steinway piano. Henry and Carolyn loved music. They were deeply involved in the Detroit music scene. Famously, after Green Book came up last year, we traced the friendship between Don Shirley and Henry Booth. And Shirley was here in Thornley in 1955. Leonard Bernstein was here at Thornley in 1946 and 1986, towards the end of Henry's life. Henry and Carolyn were also instrumental in founding different musical organizations here at Cranbrook. So they founded the Cranbrook Music Guild, as well as the Cranbrook Writers Guild, the Cranbrook House and Gardens Auxiliary, and things like St. Dunstan's Theater. And those were things that Henry did alongside his wife, Carolyn. Here is Mrs. Booth, painted in 1950, again by John Koch. And Carolyn was born in 1902. She was 5 years younger than her husband. She grew up on the east side of Detroit, and she attended the Liggett School, and then she attended Mrs. Spence School in New York City. Her father was Merton Farr, who was president of the American Shipbuilding Company, which is how there was a ocean liner, or ocean tanker, the Carolyn Farr. And she and Henry married in September of 1924, and Carolyn really dedicated her life to causes that she held dear. So she founded things like the Village Women's Club of Bloomfield Hills and the Junior League of Oakland County. She was involved in the Michigan Children's Age Society and the Menninger Foundation, and she also served on the board of Planned Parenthood Detroit. And both Henry and Carolyn were deeply involved in Christchurch Cranbrook and the Altar Guild. I know this is a lot more biography than we often have here in the Live at Fives, but I feel like it's important because these are characters who we probably don't talk about nearly as much at Cranbrook, and so you might not know as much about them. And since we're in their house, what a great time to learn more about Henry and Carolyn. Now, Henry went by the name Thistle, and throughout his life. I'm actually not sure why. Perhaps someone can fill in the comments. But this is the 50th wedding anniversary of Carolyn and Henry. And this is a piece of stained glass commemorating the occasion. And you see the Henry's sort of mantra, honey from bees, figs from thistles. Bees were used by George Booth, Henry's father, on the Cranbrook crest, representing 3 generations of booths in North America. And so Henry invented his own crest, just like his father. And you have the 3 bees on the left with the gold chevron, and then you have the thistle on the right. And then Carolyn's crest, those are her tankers, representing her father, Merton Farr's American Shipbuilding Company. Now, there's all sorts of little art objects that the family generously donated to Cranbrook when they gave us the house. Henry also gave some of these objects in his lifetime, and they've returned here to the house, including this English early 20th century illuminated manuscript, which has this lovely painted detail within the sea. And this is by Jesse Baines, and is a beautiful arts and crafts work. Down below, an African mahogany mother and child, and next to that, a Mexican rocking mother and child by Jose Pinal. Again, reflections of the Booths' love of family, but also their travels when they would pick up these details. So Henry Booth got the nickname when his sister, from his sister during an illness when he did not shave and looked like a thistle. That is a great story. Always new things to learn here at Cranbrook. Now, probably my favorite piece of furniture in the house is this cabinet, which is by Carl Malmsten. And Carl Malmsten is a Swedish woodworker. Most importantly, was one of the woodworkers who worked on Stockholm City Hall by Rainer Ostberg. And Stockholm City Hall was considered the most modern building in the world when it opened in 1917. George and Ellen Booth visited Stockholm City Hall when they were traveling. It was just such an important building. And then Henry Booth and Bob Swanson also spent time sketching and studying Stockholm City Hall. Now, Carl Malmsten, who is one of Sweden's most celebrated furniture makers of this period, he did sell retail pieces. So I would have to look in the archives to know, but I believe this is a piece that Henry Booth purchased from the workshop, that it's not a commission for the house. Interestingly, Carl Malmsten produces on commission all of the furniture for Millis House on Academy Way, but that would be 3 years later than this piece. So I'm not sure what the Malmsted, Millis, Henry Scripps Booth connection is. Malmsted was also trained with the main Swedish wood craftsman Tor Berglund, who was here at Cranbrook Academy from 28 to 31 and made all the Saarinen House furniture. So there's all these connections between the family. Above is a Chinese head in marble that was a gift of George Booth to his son. And then next to that is a painting by Myron Barlow, who was a Detroit, Michigan-born painter who worked largely in France. You may know the much larger Myron Barlow that was given to Kingswood School in the 1960s. This is a piece that Henry Booth purchased, likely at the Detroit Society of Arts and Crafts. And just as we head on to the tour, there is so much in Cranbrook Archives from Henry and Carolyn Booth. Henry was a prodigious note-taker. He wrote psalms and poems and stories, and he recorded in just amazing, valuable detail his entire life and the life of Cranbrook. And so there are probably answers to a lot of the things that I'm speculating on. It's just in the course of my work, I have not had the need to look them up yet. So one thing that's fun here at Cranbrook is just the rich legacy that Henry and Carolyn left in writing receipts, including 50 years of menus of their travels. And so you have a whole history of graphic design around the world through menus from the 1930s to the 1980s. It's pretty amazing what is in archives from Henry and Carolyn. A Chinese chest from the 20th century with a jade flower and plant that Henry purchased for Carolyn in Santa Barbara. They summered quite frequently in Santa Barbara, once staying at the same inn as Shirley Temple, and so there are pictures of Shirley Temple taken by Henry Booth. And here is the man of the hour. This is a 1966 portrait by John Cock. We did move his younger portrait, painted in 1950, to Cranbrook Archives because one of the many legacies of Henry is the founder of Cranbrook Archives, and so we felt it was necessary when the archives left Thornley Studio to bring a piece of Henry with us to its new reading room at the Art Museum. So he did not have his older portrait hanging here, but I'm lucky he had two portraits made, so we can still have one in both places. He also had a collection of glass, including significant works of Aurifors and Lalique. Most of those are now stored at the Art Museum for safekeeping, but we keep some pieces out. And I did pull two books that I wanted to share with you from Henry's collection. The first is The Tale of Chloe, which has on the inside, it has fallen out from its wheat paste, the Thornley House bookplate. And this is possibly designed by Henry Booth. I was unable to verify that earlier this week when I was preparing for the tour. It's possible it's from one of his many artists that he was a patron of, but it's a woodblock print of the archway that you enter into, and then the Thornley House facade. And up at the top is the bee representing the Booths and the thistle representing Henry. And then down below, I just thought it was funny that his edition, his run of the Encyclopedia Britannica has this beautiful thistle and then these amazing end papers, again with thistles. And this is a 1960s encyclopedia run that I pulled from the shelf there as I was looking for a Henry Booth or a Thornley bookplate. Now, as we move into the dining room, I will point out that as essentially an event and multi-purpose space, we no longer keep the house really set up as a house museum. So I have brought out some things for show, but if you want to see historic photos of the interior and how it actually looked when Henry, Carolyn, and their 5 kids lived here, head to the Cranbrook Digital Image Database. It's on the center.cranbrook.edu website, and you can just search Thornley, and you'll see dozens and dozens of photos of the house from 1927, the 1940s, all the way through the 1980s. And if you really want to get in deep, we have hundreds more images at Cranbrook Archives. In the dining room here, I want to point out a couple of objects. This lovely Austrian late 19th century oil painting depicting a chariot with a chasing dog. The old de Thorin is the artist, de Thorin. Pretty great example of sentimental Victorian painting. More unique than the Austrian painting, though, is this incredible sideboard. And the sideboard itself dates to 1949. It was made by a Cranbrook Academy of Art student. Henry was on the board of the Academy of Art for decades, and so he was always friends with the artist and would commission pieces from the house. This is from Sven Steen. And it was completed in 49, but it features panels that were made much earlier. So the panels are from 2 German brothers, Max and Wilhelm Spiegel. And Max and Wilhelm Spiegel, who carved these panels that were made into the cabinet, were born in Obergemmerau, Germany, which is a Bavarian town known for its wood carving. And they were just young boys, I think 10 and 13, when Henry Booth and Bob Swanson were on their tour through Europe. The year was 1922. Every year for 400 years, Obergemmerau had put on the Passion Play. That's what the town is more famous for than wood carving. But in 1920, the German economy was still reeling from World War I, and so there was no Passion Play, and they moved it to 1922. So Bob and Harry were not going to miss the Passion Play, and they stayed in a pensioner's house in Obergemmerau, and the pensioner's sons Max and Wilhelm Spiegel befriended these two young Americans, and they started a correspondence that lasted the next 10 years. And Henry Booth was shopping the whole time he was on his travels, and he would ship things back to America instead of taking them in his trunks. And he bought some beautiful Obergemerau woodwork, shipped it back to Cranbrook, and it never arrived. When he wrote to Frau Spiegel, she said, "I'm so sorry that you never got your carvings, but you know, Max and Wilhelm would love to carve something for you." And it started a 10-decade relationship of Henry commissioning works of carving from Max and Wilhelm Spiegel and then using them here at the house. These panels were simply commissioned as panels. There was no intended purpose. Henry Booth actually wanted to do a sort of shoulder height paneling around the entire room where he would incorporate these pieces. That didn't happen, and so in 49 they were turned into the cabinet, which is why the cabinet has this really, I think, very beautiful balance between the carved detail and then this sort of modernistic multi-purpose form. It actually comes apart into 3 sections. Now, depicted on the cabinet are different important figures. Christopher Columbus there, then birds and animals. Down here is Charles Lindbergh with the Spirit of St. Louis, and Lindbergh, of course, was a neighbor of the Booths here on Cranbrook Road. Here is Adam, and then next to Adam is Eve with her apple and the devil. And then down here is Chief Pontiac, the namesake of Pontiac, which is the next city up. And then I think those are all the historical figures and then just beautiful detailing. But notice they did sign, so W.S. William Spiegel, 1925. And they carved these between 25 and 29. And so they sent them as a series over 4 years. Also quite great is the Wilhelm Spiegel and Max Spiegel designed cabinet. And any guesses as to what this is? If we pay close enough attention and aren't tempted to just yank it open, we see here there is a sun. In the center are these electric bolts. And then elsewhere, there is a flame. I'm not seeing the flame. These are all sources of heat. The year 1926 is carved into the side, and this was commissioned to cover the plate warmer. And so sun, fire, electricity opens up to the electric plate warmer, which opens into the pantry beyond. Now, in this room, there are a couple other works of art. Henry was a lifelong watercolorist, and so he did these pieces here. Actually, these are not Henry Booth watercolors. I probably found the only 2 in the house that are not. So we'll skip those and we'll head to this painting that I recently hung. I don't know where Henry Booth had this painting hanging while he lived in the house. It's part of his collection. The piece that hung here was a work on paper, and I wanted to get it out of the sunlight so that it would have a longer useful life. And so I hung this oil painting from Henry's collection. It's entitled Donald's World. It's from 1942, and it's by Matt Kahn. And if you don't know the name Matt Kahn, he is an architecture graduate of Cranbrook Academy of Art, who went on with his wife Lyda Kahn to teach at Stanford and to design Eichler homes. So they're the architects behind the Eichler sort of mid-century modern tract homes. Matt and Lyda Kahn did many other important buildings as a couple, but this is a pretty wonderful example of his painting, which I was not familiar with him as a painter. Now, I want to keep the tour moving, so we'll head into the sequence of pantries and kitchens. Henry Booth, again, was 23 when he designed this house, and he really was building a house for a staff. He was building a home just like his parents, a house that would be fully served. There was no sort of idea of downsizing. And so he has a 3-part kitchen, which would have been very traditional in a wealthy home like this. So in here you have the butler's pantry. You have the flat drawers for the linens. And then you have leather-topped countertops, which are so that the plates don't chip as you are preparing the dinner. And then you have the glass-fronted cabinets for all of the dishes. Then you have the cold kitchen, which is where the refrigerator would have been and where you would have prepared cold foods on this cold slab of marble. And then you have the main kitchen, which has this really amazing wood-burning oven here, again with these very Saarinen-inspired brickwork up above. And I love the way that the bricks move on to become shelves supporting this plate rail around the top of the room. Metal countertops, which would have been very appropriate for the period. And I'm just looking at the time here. I'm dragging today, everyone. So I'll speed up the pace of the tour a bit. This room was Henry's study. It's one of the only rooms in the house that he did redesign. So it changed in 1939 and again a few decades later. He selected this light blue color later in life in order to better offset his many watercolors. And so he had the room absolutely filled with watercolors of his own. We also see the Pewabic pottery fireplace and the many other Pewabic installations throughout the home. The Pewabic tiles that are here in the windowsill, which I understand the grandchildren used to sit here and wait for their parents to pick them up, look out and see the house. This very beautiful design of the Pewabic. These tiles come from the shrine of the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., which was a Pewabic pottery project in the 1920s, around the same time as Thornley. And so these are pieces that are designed and used for Washington. Yes, this is the courtroom. Very sorry for the misnomer. The house did receive an addition. And so heading into the addition, there is the maid's work. So we'll head back into the main lobby here, past engravings from Piranesi, as well as an engraving of Venice, an engraving from Venice that Henry purchased from during his 1922 trip to Europe. Now, I'm going to head downstairs. I don't think there's Wi-Fi there, so I hope you stick with me. If not, I'll run back up and I should reconnect. The stairs, again, a detail that perhaps comes from his youth. The stairway opened up directly into this front door vestibule. These beautiful tiles on the floor are from Spain and were a gift from George Booth to his son. But Henry felt he needed something to stop people from falling backwards down the stairs. And so he designed this stunning iron gate that was made in the Cranbrook Forge by Walter Nichols. So Walter Nichols was doing all of Saarinen's gates for Cranbrook, and he also executed these very fine iron gates for Thornley. Now, as we head down the stairs, we are heading into the Tunisian tile room, and we'll just look at it from afar because I want to try and stay connected. These tiles were purchased in North Africa by Henry in one of his trips, and then laid out to his own design. This is not the furniture that would have been down here. This is the porch furniture stored for winter. But it does have a fireplace, and this is where they would have parties. It's where they would have dances. This is also where the children would come in after playing in the pool in the backyard. And it has this great ceiling of illuminated trusses. So the structural system of the construction is also providing the lighting. And then the vestibule over here that led to various storage rooms, workshops, cellar. We'll head back upstairs. In this front coat closet, the light is Swedish from the Orifors Company, who also provided many of the lights for Saarinen's buildings on campus. And in the powder room, we have a painting by Henry Booth. of this Italian scene, Mediterranean scene. Now I want to next head upstairs underneath our guardian goddess. As we head up the stairs, you may have noticed when I walked down how these are all solid wooden beams. These solid wood beams are kiln dried, and as part of keeping them from splitting, they're pegged. And so if you notice, this is a single tree that's growing out. The middle of a tree, the heartwood, is not structurally solid, and it would crack or be rotten. And so Henry has used these pegged oak beams all the way up the stairs. Some are laminated beams, but then more of them are these pegged designs. And so it really has this lovely clarity of structural expression. And if I catch the camera right, you'll see that there's nothing between the steps. So you can sometimes see light passing through these beams. Now, there are Pewabic pottery radiator covers here in the stairway. And then as we head up this very generously proportioned walk, we pass a clock that is from Harrods. And then we come to another William and Max Spiegel gate. And then behind it is a Wilhelm Spiegel carving. Very Germanic form with the turkey up above and little birds. I'm not sure. I guess he's on a hunt, perhaps. We'll make him more gentle and say that's a plow. Now, up here on the second floor, the three of the children lived on the third floor, the older two sons and Cynthia, and then the two younger daughters lived here. And then there were also rooms for Henry and Carolyn, which would have been very typical of the time to have a his and her bedroom. The Booths had it at Cranbrook House. The Saarinen had his and her beds within their chamber. It is a very upper class way of living. Here we see more of Henry's watercolors, as well as a lovely vase by Maya Grotel, the longtime head of Cranbrook's ceramics department. There were curtains that divided here, the sort of master's chamber. Mrs. Booth's bedroom is on the left, and then Henry's bedchamber is on the right. In the center is the oratory, which is the family chapel. And the oratory features furniture from the American Seating Company, 20th century, but then it also has this 17th century Italian altar. Is this an altar? With the beautiful inlaid tulips down here. Now, Henry Booth, he did use his father's home, his parents' home, as his own office after his mom died in 48 and his dad in 49. And he, at that time, also began relocating certain things from Cranbrook House here to Thornley. And so these lovely embroidered hangings came from the still room at Cranbrook House. And then here is an example of the work of the Spiegel brothers done for a specific room. So this ceiling was carved in Germany by the Spiegels just for the oratory here. And it features various parables and psalms and other religious icons. Then formerly on the altar here was the Arthur Neville Kirk cross, which was carved at hammered and chased at Cranbrook Academy of Art. And I will say that the Kirk Cross is still very much a treasure of Cranbrook. It is in storage at Cranbrook Art Museum. You know, this house is used for a lot of events, always staffed, but it is not a house museum, and so we don't want to keep something that beautiful and that precious out on display. But the cross was most recently displayed, I know, in 2017, and of course it is always attributed as a gift from Henry and Carolyn. You can see the cross. It is on our blog, I think. What is still here is this lovely creche, which is by Clivia Calder Morrison, who is the aunt of Alexander Calder, the sister of Alexander Calder's father, who was a noted architectural mural painter. And Clivia Calder Morrison was lived in Detroit for some time, and she was friends with Henry and Carolyn, and so this was a gift to her friends. I don't know if they were friends with her nephew, Alexander Calder, of the Mobile fame. And then the little Madonna and Child here is by the studio of Owen Bonnewitt. We'll next move into Henry's bedroom. And the house was used as an inn for quite some time, and so it has changed. The furniture arrangements of these rooms have changed. Here is a painting by Henry of Cranbrook House, my favorite view of the house from the southern side, or north looking south. And then the other really stunning work in this room is by David Friedenthal. And Friedenthal is a 1930s student at the Academy of Art who is known for his mural paintings and his weavings. So he was one of the students of Studio Loya Saarinen and Maya Anderson-Virda. This is a watercolor that Friedenthal did, depicting the island city of Manhattan from Weehawken. Next, we finally arrive at our first Pewabic bathroom through Henry's dressing room with these amazing cabinets that I'm pretty jealous of. Handcrafted feel of Pewabic and the lovely handcrafted crown molding. Now, Henry's bedroom connected through to the guest bedroom, which again has a Pewabic pottery bathroom, Balinese frame textiles above the beds. This Pewabic has this sort of Egyptian flair with these lotus tiles inset. And this is a lot of Pewabic tile. To have it floor to ceiling like this is pretty unusual, and was quite a commission for Mary Chase Perry Stratton and her pottery. We'll head on to the Carolyn's wing of the home, to Japanese prints, which were a gift of Martha Booth Jacobs, to we're back, and we'll head into Carolyn's bedroom, which is much larger and brighter than her husband's. She had her writing desk there. On display are more watercolors from Henry. Carolyn had a quite beautiful glass cabinet here where she had her collection of small perfume bottles and sort of little trinkets, many of which still belong to the family. But we will head into the sequence of dressing rooms and bathrooms. So another beautiful closet. And then through the next arch door, we come to the Pewabic magnum opus, which is, again, floor-to-ceiling handmade tiles from the city of Detroit. Pewabic pottery is one of the great survivors of the American arts and crafts movement. It was founded in 1903 by Mary Chase Perry Stratton. She was a feminist ceramicist who was also involved in the Detroit Society of Arts and Crafts, had a famously tumultuous relationship with George Booth, and actually the Thornley Commission is one of a series of events that helped restore the relationship between George Booth and Mary Chase Perry Stratton. What did they fall out about? You may ask. George Booth, ever that Midwestern Episcopalian, did not think the price was fair for her proposed tiles at Cranbrook House, and so he said, I'll take half the order and I'll mix them with other tiles. 10 years without talking to each other. But of course, they restored their relationship and were able to do beautiful work at Christ Church Cranbrook and at Kingswood School. Next, we will head in. So this is connected to the suite, is the closet here. And through the closet is the nursery that I think became Martha's bedroom, our Melinda's. And again, I really can't tell you if these colors are correct. This seems very 80s to me. But here we have another Pewabic bathroom, this time with sunflower detailings called out in these the different color glazes. And then I love the tiles that are are just the same sort of off-white glaze, and you can sort of actually you can see the clay body through the tile as well. Different birds. This is very typical of Mary Chase Perry Stratton's aesthetic, to have these tiles pressed in place, all in the same sort of color, but then arranged very asymmetrically. Down below is a Pewabic floor of a coordinating color that has the little flowers from above. And I've only just noticed, looking at it through my phone, that those are sort of the flowers looking straight down, and then here are the flowers looking in section. And this is a great chance to look outside of the home. There goes Peter Rabbit. And you see in the backyard from 1937 is Thornley's studio, which was gifted from Henry to Cranbrook Archives, who were located there until 2012. Now it's used for archive records as well as an apartment. And then we also see the servants' service wing of the house that was part of that later addition, and you can see quite clearly the joint between the two phases. We won't be going into any rooms in that wing. It's used now for the storage of cultural properties. Okay, so the colors are original, I have been told. The part that made me think it was 80s is this valance design. There is a lovely portrait over here of Stephen Booth, Young Master Stephen, I think is the title. And it is a lovely charcoal piece, or pastel rather. And then this little door here would have gotten you into the back hallway. And so at night, this is after the Lindbergh kidnapping, at night, the family could lock themselves up and they could all get to the front and back of the house and fully secured between the two. Now, we'll check out a few more rooms, and I hope that the Wi-Fi sticks with me. Now, this was the daughter's room who did not like Pewabic, the non-Pewabic bathroom with the very mid-century flat tiles, the exact same tiles I had in my childhood bathroom from 1950. So a little non-Pewabic moment. Also in this room, more watercolors by Henry. And then here is a really lovely self-portrait of Henry's older brother, James Scripps Booth. And James was an artist. He dropped out of high school to pursue art, and he was an inventor, an automobile maker, the Scripps Booth Auto Company. And so this was painted in 1929, and it shows James Scripps drawing a nude, a reclining nude. Okay, so we'll just take a peek down the service hall, which has this great arched ceiling, and there are more maids' rooms back there. And then we see here the little butler's pantry kitchen for the second floor, which has all of the children's names painted in this really beautiful, quite Sarnen-esque, I assume Henry Booth did it, with all of the children's names. So Stephen, the oldest, and then David and Cynthia, and then Melinda and Martha down below. Next to the butler's pantry is this incredible Pewabic iced water dispenser, which has the iridescent glaze that Mary Chase Perry Stratton was famous for, this shiny glaze that she would achieve by taking kerosene and spraying it into the kiln. Now we'll head up to the top floor of the house, which has an equally grand, if narrower, stairway, illuminated by the window here, which remember that because we'll see the other side in a moment. Now up here, this was converted into an apartment, and so very little of the original furnishings remain. This was called Henry's Hall of Fame, or Walk of Fame, and it had all of the many, many, many awards that he won throughout his life on display. In this bedroom here, we find my favorite Pewabic bathroom, and the last bathroom that we'll see on our tour today. It has this beautiful green color, and I love the rhythm of the 2-inch tiles within the smaller 1-inch tiles inset, and then just these swirls of the glaze going around. And quite cleverly, the window that we saw in the stairway is bringing light through the bathroom, and so you have the clear glass up above, and then the dappled glass for modesty. And then look at the shower. Oh, the best shower at Cranbrook. With these fish scale Pewabic pottery tiles. And even a Pewabic pottery ceiling. Okay, so I hope that you have well, before I conclude, the rest of this floor, the boys' rooms were in this series, and then there was a playroom that ran across Henry's bedroom that had a cork floor. There's also a pretty amazing cedar closet, and then we'll go down to the cedar closet. I don't want to take you into the playroom just because that is where we store many of our objects. But the cedar closet here smells amazing if you had smell-o-vision, and a great arched door. The house is in great shape. It is very well built. Charles Vermouth and Sons were the contractors if you were looking to build edifice. This year, we will be using Thornley for classroom space for the first time as part of socially distancing the schools, and so it will have a new purpose that I think Henry and Carolyn would be quite happy that their home is still providing both beauty and usefulness to Cranbrook. Henry he dedicated his life to Cranbrook and to making this place, this dream of his parents, a reality for another generation. We have to thank him for so many of the programs that are still here at Cranbrook, like the Founders Medal and the Founders Award that was sadly canceled because of the coronavirus. We also have to thank him for many of our traditions. So Henry helped design the institution flags and the institution shields, and he helped preserve the memory and make sure that people remembered these pieces. He founded the vestry at Christ Church Cranbrook. He was a trustee for the Cranbrook Foundation for its entire run from 27 to 73. He was on the boards of Brookside, Kingswood, and the Art Academy. He was on the board of the Evening News Association and the Booth Newspaper Association. He founded the Oakland Citizens League. He really dedicated his life to the betterment of the Cranbrook community and to Southeast Michigan as a whole. So we're grateful that his family chose to give Thornley to Cranbrook after his death, and we're grateful that Henry gave so much in his own lifetime to Cranbrook. If you want to learn more, there are lots of blogs written about Henry Booth on the Cranbrook Kitchen Sink blog. There is also a number of historical records on the Center for Collections and Research page in the archives. You can read a biography of Henry and Carolyn. I will be back next Wednesday. I'm not going to say where because I've not gotten approval to go there yet, but I'll be back next Wednesday for another Live at 5 with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. I am your host, Kevin Adkisson, the Associate Curator for the Center, and I hope everyone is being well. Please wear your mask, and I look forward to seeing you in a week. If you have other questions, please send them as a message or an email. And if you have other places that you want me to take my phone and to take you on a tour of, just send me a message. I'm always happy to take suggestions. And as always, I have to ask if you are enjoying these Live at 5 tours and enjoying learning more about Cranbrook. We appreciate and we need your support. And so you can go to our website, center.cranbrook.edu, and there is a support button, and we appreciate anything that you can give in this time where it's looking like we'll have no public tour season for quite a while. So thanks for joining in on these Live at 5 tours. There's no way I could ever have gotten 84 of you or 100 of you through at once. So I hope that you enjoyed this digital virtual tour through Thornley House. And I will see you next week for another Live at 5. And I'll leave you with the image of Thornley. Quite an edifice.